Hey everyone at YouTube, and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. In today's video, we will be looking at managers in the current Premier League, but instead of managing for clubs they have managed in the past and currently managing, they can only be managers at the clubs where they were players. So I don't know, Pep Guardiola, during his time as a player, played at Barcelona. He was later a manager. That'll probably be the same. But say Mikel Arteta, he was a player. That's a bad example, isn't it? But you get what I mean. Like managers who weren't players at the current club they're at. What you'll get the hang of it when we get into. Oh, this is so bad. But of an explanation. But yeah, we'll be going into the past, rearranging what happened in the past and what's happening in the future. We'll start with Mikel Arteta. He retired in 2016 from playing. So here's how I envisage his career if he started to instantly go into management. Instead of becoming the coach at Manchester City like he did, he will become the manager at Barcelona's B team, guiding them for a season and getting them promoted from the third tier with an incredible 88 points, well clear of any rivals. This will grab the attention of the French side, Paris Saint-Germain. Got to remember, he was still renowned as a player, so much like Lampard got a gig at Chelsea, so does Arteta with PSG. In the 2017-18 season, in real life, they won the title, but Arteta doesn't get anywhere near as many points, making it a nervy finish to the season, only sneaking the title on the last day, and he gets the sack because this is peak PSG and they want the Champions League in the bag. He then moves to Rangers the following season instead of Steven Gerrard taking over. The 2018-19 season at Rangers wasn't even close and came second behind Celtic with a grand total of 15 points behind finishing a comfortable second. He gets given a second season again and rooted far from the title in second. And having a pretty poor campaign, he does get sacked. He then returns to Spain with Real Sociedad. However, he struggles to implement a winning philosophy, only winning 1 in 15 games with lots of draws, ending in 15th by the time he was sacked after them 15 games. He was then handed a caretaker manager spell with Everton, who at that time would be struggling for relegation, and he turns the ship around and ends up in a comfortable 11th. He then gets the permanent gig at Goodison Park and he remains with the club, having been pretty consistent performances, ending up spending 6 years at the club, with his final season 27-28 ending up in the Europa League. The first time in decades, and they also finished above rivals Liverpool. This turned the head of Arsenal, who had been in 5th place in the season before, and because of his legendary status with the club, he bided his time and took the reins. In his first season, he turned the club's fortunes and got the club to finish third in his first season, comfortably in the Champions League slots, and ended up in the quarterfinals of the Europa League, dumped out by Sevilla. The season after, he still managed Champions League, albeit on the final day of the season, with a win against Fulham to secure a slot. The season after, he won the FA Cup, being the first cup apart from the Scottish League Cup he had won in his career. He also secured another 4th place finish. He's quickly becoming established as one of the best managers in the world, having not won a title. Question marks are being raised whether he can get a league title, and he won the FA Community Shield for the following season. He gained another FA Cup and took Arsenal to third. It was the greatest season since Wenger was at the club. He then won the FA Community Shield again, and in his final season, finished second in the league, but seeing he couldn't take the team any further, he retired as a manager in the 2032-33 season at the age of 51. Relatively young for a manager, and everyone questioned whether he would manage Spain, but he never did. He, at the age of 65, became the club ambassador, but never stood on the touchline again, insisting when asked that it was time for the new group of managers to make their mark, and he'd all he could, and he is happy with his management spell. Unai Emery, well, he retired from football in 2004. After retirement, he takes up a role with Real Sociedad's B team, taking the reins for 5 seasons, enjoying much success until 2009, where after taking much success with the academy, he was chosen as Real Sociedad's first team manager, with the senior team languishing in the second division. Unlike in real life, Emery failed to get Sociedad out in his first and therefore season and was therefore sacked. Before the 2010-11 season, he was appointed manager of Toledo, who were then in the 4th tier of Spanish football. He took over the club for 4 seasons until the start of 2014-15, having achieved promotion in his first season, was relegated and then promoted again. However, he steadied the ship and left the club within the mid-table in the 3rd tier of Spanish football. He moved to fellow 3rd tier club Racing Ferrol. In his first season in 2015-16, he managed to finish 2nd with the club, and the season after he finished 3rd. As can be seen with his managerial career, is taking a very different course. At the end of 2016-17, he moved on to Leganes, then in the top flight. And is this his breakthrough? Well, he manages to rescue them from relegation and reach the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey. However, he realizes that coaching at the top level isn't for him. With a year of media scrutiny and sort of the whole sort of thing of Spanish media and stuff, like too much for the headline. So he was about to retire, but at the end of the 2017-18 season, an interesting prospect of helping Lorca Deportiva, a relatively new Phoenix club, onto a path into the 1st tier from 4th tier reared its head. During the 2017-18 season, they had been relegated from 3rd tier and sacked their manager, so Emery was classed as a big-name appointment. He managed to guide Lorca to 2nd in the table, but he left this club at the end of the season after falling out over a budget, being unable to improve his squad. He vowed never again to manage a club, and he didn't after 2018-19. He refused to manage, and he became one of them nearly man as a manager. Andoni Iraola. He retired in 2016. He joined Baskonia as a manager to achieve his coaching badges and try and gain experience. In 2016-17, they were in the 4th tier, and he could only maintain a mid-table finish. He decided he needed to earn his coaching badges behind the scenes, so before 2017-18, he joined Bilbao Athletic. This could be seen as a promotion as they were in the 3rd tier at the time, but in 2018-19, he led them to a 6th place finish, only 3 points from the playoffs. In 2019-20, he led them to a 2nd place and won the playoffs, earning promotion to the 2nd tier for the first time since 2015-16. Due to Athletic Bilbao's poor slump at the end of the season, 2019-20, he took over to the final match of the season and became the permanent manager ahead of the 2020-21 season. He had mixed results in the first half of that campaign, with some calls for him to return to the academy, but come the second half, form improved, with him achieving a runners-up in the Copa del Rey and won the Supercopa. The season after, in 2021-22, he had a decent run in both competitions, but failed the penultimate hurdle and finished 7th in the league. He stayed at the club, being runners-up in the Copa del Rey a further 2 times and winning the Supercopa again. He even reached the Europa League with them for 6 seasons, including a run to the finals in 26-27. He was adored in the Basque Country, and he retired from Bilbao in 2031-32. However, just before the 2033 MLS season started, he couldn't resist returning to management one last time, so he took over at New York City. He steered them to mid-table in his first season, and the season after he took them to the playoff final but lost. He then formally retired at the end of 2034 at the age of 52 to work as a pundit for the Athletic Bilbao's TV station. Like, you know how they have individual TV ones anyhow. Thomas Frank, this man would not have a career as a manager because he was a player with teams that don't even come up on Wikipedia, and quite frankly, they're like amateur teams anyhow, they're like Sunday League teams. Robert De Zerbi. He retired in 2013 and joined as a coach at AC Milan until the end of 2012-13. He then took the interim job at Monza from the start of the 2013-14 season, leading them to promotion in his first season to the 3rd tier. Surprisingly, he turned down a permanent gig at least 3 times throughout the season, constantly saying he was keeping his options open. So before the start of 2014-15, he took over Padova, again on an interim basis, as the club was newly created and his manager was still on the lookout, with De Zerbi potentially being given the job on a permanent, and in his first season he again led a team to promotion into Serie C. Yet again he was offered the permanent job at the end of the season, and again decided not to take it up and go on the interim basis with Avellino before 2015-16. This was a step up and proved too difficult of a gap, and he led them to a mid-table in Serie B, before being dismissed. Before the 2016-17 season, he became a coach of Salernitana, but he never went on to a match because he was offered the interim role at Lecco. However, with the club rooted to the bottom of the table, he was dismissed after 7 games in Serie D. At the start of 2017-18, he was offered the permanent role at Foggia, and he accepted because he was tired of interim jobs. This was a surprise appointment considering they were in Serie B at the time, but in his first season he missed out on the playoffs by 2 points on the final day of the season. He therefore stayed for a second season. However, with the club deducted 6 points originally and then excluded from the league at the end of the season, De Zerbi ultimately had his hands tied and couldn't prevent them a relegation spot. He needed to find a new club instead of sticking around due to the massive cost-cutting measures that were imposed. And before the 2019, before the 2019-20 season, though, he was offered a job at Arezzo in Serie C. And in his first season, he led them to a respectable 9th place, but turned down an offer for the playoffs due to COVID. What? Oh, yeah, because of the COVID cost, they couldn't afford promotion, like in real life. At the start of 2020-21, he took over Catania, with the potential new ownership backing him. This became more mysterious, and despite the off-the-field matters, he led them to a comfortable 6th place playoff finish. But he lost in the first round against his former club. However, having been shown to admirably cope with the off-field situations and issues at numerous clubs, Napoli decided to take a gamble on De Zerbi at the start of the 2020-22 season. This came as a shock, and in his first season, he finished 5th with the club. With his impressive style of football, he was given another season in 2022-23, and he led Napoli to a 3rd place finish and reached the round of the 16 to be knocked out by Sevilla in the Europa League. And of course, we all know Sevilla are absolute masterminds in that competition. But in January 2023-24, he left the club after a disagreement with the ownership, instead opting to take over Brescia as a shock move down to Serie B on an interim basis. He could only lead the Northern club to 12th place, so left at the end of the season. He then took interim charge of Avellino for a second time. They had been promoted via the playoffs the season prior, but the coach had left to take over the reins of a bigger club. And in that season, he won the 15 games in Serie B, leading the team to finish a comfortable safety in 14th. With new owners taken over at Napoli, he returned to the Serie A club ahead of the 25-26 season. He took them to winning the Serie A title as a shock to many, and this was helped with Juventus being put into Serie C before the season for financial irregularities, and both Milan clubs in debt for building their new stadiums. Claiming he was done having won everything in Italy, he left to Romania. He joined Cluj, a very big club there for the 26-27 season, but didn't have any notable achievements there, and after 27-28 he was sacked for not being competitive for the title. It wasn't until 2029, in January time, that he returned to Italy to take over Trento. He was competitive in Serie C, but he felt like he wasn't getting a thrill anymore. So at the end of the 2028-29 season, he retired from management on his 50th birthday to become a player agent. Vincent Kompany. He became player manager of Anderlecht in 2019, just like in real life. But this time he was made permanent manager until 2022, retiring from playing in 2020 to focus on management. Having done the same in real life, I don't really need to go over what he did, but this good form led to him being recruited manager of Hamburger in the 2022-23 season. In his first season, he led them to 2nd place in the 2nd Bundesliga, and therefore promotion, and he stuck around with the club for the 2023-24 season, finishing the season respectful 10th. With such a small budget and being a Manchester City legend, he was appointed as Pep's successor for the 2024-25 season. I won't bore you, but he was around at City for 11 seasons until 2035-26. He won with them 4 Premier Leagues, 2 FA Cups, 4 EFL Cups, 2 FA Community Shields, and in his first season the Club World Cup. Bearing in mind at this time, Manchester City were placed in the National League because of the numerous FFP issues that have reached the news recently. Yes, they do eventually do something about it. He led them to the Premier League in 4 consecutive promotions and only missed out on the Premier League title twice. He then decided he wanted to deal with unfinished business at Anderlecht, and therefore spent his last season as manager with the Belgium outfit, winning the Belgian triple of the Pro League, Belgian Cup, and the Conference League. He went down as one of the greatest managers of his age, having won it all, and became a pundit and a club ambassador for Manchester City after retiring in 2037 at the age of 51. Mauricio Pochettino. He retired from playing in 2006, and for the 2006-07 season, he took over Newell's Old Boys in Argentina, having a dismal first season ending in 19th. That added confidence was apparently all he needed, because after a couple of transfer windows, he took them to 11th for the 2007-08 season. Because he got given a new contract, as like, you know how they do with the owners, sometimes giving new contracts to show that they support them. And with signs for better things to come, he actually led them in the 2008-09 season, and he continued the ascent by finishing 5th the following season. In 2009-10, he took them to 2nd, just missing out on the title by 2 points. He had several offers across South America, but he wanted a title with his boyhood club, so in 2010-11, he decided to take them into a season, vowing to win the title. However, a disastrous campaign full of injuries led them dropping down to 9th. However, his previous campaign hadn't avoided the attention of European eyes, and he resigned from Newell's, knowing he had tried his best, and left at Espanyol for the 2011-12 season. In his first season, he led them to a comfortable mid-table in 14th, and a quarter-finals in the Copa del Rey. Knowing it takes time for his squads to come to fruition, there was lots of excitement building in Catalonia, some saying that Barcelona could be toppled in a few years. Do also note this coincides with his time there as manager in real life. The following season, he improved, leading them to 12th. However, the season after, he slumped back to 14th, and the hype around him was beginning to dry up. The next season, he led them to 10th and won the Copa del Rey for the 5th time in the club's history. This led them gaining Europa League football for the next season, and in that competition they reached the round of 16, as well as 13th in the league. But they performed admirably against PSG in the round of 16, only going out on penalties. This was unfortunate, as PSG knew Pochettino from his time as a player, and so they poached him at the start of the 2016-17 season. In his first season of the club, he led them to 2nd League On, but won the Coupe de France and League Cup double, as well as the Super Cup, and so he was given a referendum that he must win the league the next season or face the sack. Well, he did win the league. In fact, he won the treble. However, he wanted a more of a challenge than using the world's biggest stars to beat farmers in France. However, he did stick to the land of love, wine, and cheese, and he went to the club of Bordeaux for the 2018-19 season. And he's very competent at the club, getting to the semi-finals of the League Cup, being dumped out by his former club at PSG, and also finished 3rd in the group stage of the Europa League. However, his form in the league was poor, with him floating in mid-table and no prospect of Europe next season. He was dismissed in mid-February. He returned to Espanyol on an interim basis, this time in less hype but still excitement. He finished the campaign strongly, only losing twice to get them to 7th in the table. He was rewarded with a permanent contract ahead of the 2019-20 campaign. However, in his first season for a second stint, he got the team relegated, but the owners, with preoccupied in a legal battle over FFP, spent over 5 years to sack the manager. He therefore led them into a second season, despite them finishing 20th the season before. In 2020-21, he led the club to an immediate bounce back, dominating the league and winning the title on the last day of the season. But they were promoted with 3 games left to go. He then quit the club after promotion, some saying he couldn't keep the club safely in La Liga. Some say the manager was going to be sacked. Some say he was looking for a bigger club after winning promotion. Whatever it was, he left the club at the end of the 2020-21 season and never went back into the managerial world again, instead opting for a family life and became a sports scientist for Watford. Roy Hodgson. Well, he retired, bless him, in 1976 and probably shouldn't be a manager anymore in terms of age. Man, just go and appreciate retirement. But he became a coach at Crystal Palace, involved in the staff that would enable them to be promoted in 76-77 as Terry Venables' understudy. He then, before the start of the 1977-78 season, decided he wanted a hand at being head boy. So he took control of Tonbridge Angels in the Southern League Division 1 South and finished 14th in his first season. The following season, he ended up in the exact same position and was given one more season to see improvements in the club. However, the league structure being reformed due to the formation of the Alliance Premier League, which is now known as the National League, although it has been as a conference as well, Tonbridge were placed in the Southern League Premier South Division. And so he struggled in the new league because it was effectively a promotion, ending up in the bottom of the league with 15 points. He was then sacked at the end of the season to bring a more experienced manager in. So in 1980-81, before the start of the season, he took over at Gravesend and Northfleet, now known as Ebbsfleet United. A huge gamble considering they were in the Alliance Premier League. How would Roy cope? Well, he learnt from his mistakes and he adapted to his philosophy to suit non-league and steered the club to 15th, avoiding relegation by 5 points. However, the following season he led them to 20th and relegation back to the Southern League and was again sacked. Was this to be the case of a failed manager who never really had a place in the history books? Well, however, the original Maidstone United took a gamble, desperate to improve on mediocrity. Well, in his first season, he certainly did that, leading them to second in the table, despite at the start of the season being tipped for relegation. They actually only missed out on the title by a point. However, before the start of the 1983-84 season, he took charge of Ashford Town in Kent, now known as Ashford United, and that was 2 leagues down. It was in the Southern League Division 1 South. It is unknown why he would make the full 2 leagues, but later down the line it was revealed that the original club wanted to move to Newcastle and Roy couldn't dedicate to move his family that far north. He recorded an 8th place finish with his new club and reached the semi-finals of the Courage Eastern Floodlit Cup and reached the 4th qualifying round of the FA Cup. In a weird twist of events, he became a manager. He decided to quit as manager and went to South Africa, and no one really understood why. But in 1985, he claimed to have retired to a holiday home in South Africa, and he didn't want to go back in management. But before the 1985-86 season, he came back to Kent and took over Carshalton Athletic, who were in the Isthmian League Premier Division. He had a poor first season, just avoiding relegation, finishing 20th. Many were expected him to be sacked, and he kept on stating he was building something for promotion in the future. The following season, he led them to 15th, but fans had enough, and he was sacked at the end of the season. He then decided to stop managing football and became a language teacher in Croydon for private tutoring. Come on, we've all envisaged it. Roy Hodgson as a teacher. He just gives them vibes. Sean Dyche. After retiring in 2007, and became involved in the coaching staff at Nottingham Forest for the 2007-8 season, helping them to promotion back to the Championship. He then joined Chesterfield as first-team manager, as he was picked out for his ability to get the best out of teams in the lower EFL. In his first season in League Two, he managed to get them to 10th in the 2008-9 season, and he reached the third round in the FA Cup, losing to Ipswich Town. In 2009-10, he improved, reaching 8th in League Two, missing out on the playoffs by 2 points. In 2010-11, he achieved what he set out to do and dominated League Two by winning the league title by 5 points. However, in 2011-12, he got them relegated again in 22nd, but the board stuck with him as he was seen as their only credible way of winning promotion back to League One. In 2012-13, he missed out on the playoffs by 2 points, again finishing 7th. By this point, there were question marks over whether or not he was the right man to take the club forward and stay in the league above. But a better little devil you know mentality took over, and in 2013-14, he was again winner of League Two, this time only clear by 3 points at the top, but was still dominant throughout the season. He was awarded a new contract until 2015-16, and that paid off as he led them to 6th in League One, a playoff position against all odds. However, he lost against Preston North End in the semi-finals, to nobody's surprise really. However, what was surprising was that he decided to stick around for another season, but finished a disappointing 18th. Not relegated, but wasn't a stunner of the season. However, his performances the season prior hadn't gone unnoticed, and he became the manager of Bristol City at the end of his contract. They were in the Championship at that time, and he led them to 17th. A very comfortable safety, what was really expected at the time, considering they were recently promoted to the Championship. He led them into the 2017-18 season, and at the start of the season they were being phenomenal, with them being in second place after Boxing Day. However, he only got 1 point in 4 games, and it led to him being sacked, even though the club sat 4th place, with many pundits and fans alike describing it as being a shock sacking of the season. He, for the remainder of the 2017-18 season, became the interim manager at Luton Town. And rumour had it he was just to make sure he could keep his name in the picture for a bigger job. And the club was having a rocky January with 3 losses and 3 wins, and the manager was attracted to a bigger job. Bear in mind, Luton was still top of League Two. It was almost a given league title. However, with the new manager blues and uncertainty of the squad, they began to wobble, ending up in second, bowling the title, but was the 3rd promotion from League Two for Sean Dyche. This led to him, before the 2018-19 season, being appointed as Millwall's manager. And the season before, they had only just missed out on the playoffs by 3 points. It was therefore expected that they would be heavy favourite for the playoffs. However, Sean Dyche in the Championship always struggled in his first season, and he ended in 21st, avoiding relegation by 4 points. The only reason he wasn't sacked was due to being renowned for needing time to make his teams gel. And the next season, he took them back to 8th place, missing out on the playoffs by 2 points. The season after, he could only take them to 11th, and he left the club to join Watford. For the 2021-22 season, he couldn't help Watford to survival, but he was kept on as manager. The season afterwards, he led them to 11th in the Championship, but was given them 1 more season to ensure promotion. And this was due to his time at Bristol City being highlighted as the reason he could do success at this level if he was just given a little bit of chance. But in the 23-24 season, he could only take them to 16th in the table and was sacked at the end of the season. He then dropped down to League Two with Northampton Town, and in his first season, he led them to a playoff promotion, his 4th promotion from League Two. For the season after 25-26, he couldn't prevent the Cobblers being rooted in 24th and relegated straight back down, and was sacked at the end of the season. He ended his management career with 5 separate promotions as a manager and a further one in the form of a coaching capacity. He then became a pundit for the EFL matches for Sky Sports, especially in League Two. He was called upon quite a lot. I was known as the best manager in League Two, but one which couldn't quite cut him in Championship. Marco Silva. He retired in 2011. He became assistant manager at Belenenses for the 2011-12 season, taking over the final game of the season in a season that they finished in 5th. For the 2012-13 season, he took over at Atlético Clube de Portugal, also in the Segunda Division. In his first season, he led them to 17th, which earned him the sack. He then took over Trofense, a team who was struggling in the bottom end of the Segunda Division. He led them to 19th, a very poor finishing, showing no signs of improvement from the previous season, so was placed on gardening leave. However, he returned after 1 game absence after failing to find a successor who would be willing to take over the club. For the 2014-15 season, he ended up bottom of the league and was relegated to the Campeonato de Portugal. That's the 3rd tier at the time. Again, he stayed at the club for the 2015-16 season, despite mass protests for him to be sacked. And in the first stage, things didn't get any easier, as he could only reach the relegation groups and only just avoided the relegation playout. And after this, he was sacked in disgrace. It looked like he would never manage again, but miraculously he found a club before 2016-17 in the form of Rio Ave in the Premier Liga. Some suspected foul play and that he had bribed the owners, or that some fixing was involved in a bet. Ultimately, he was suspended, and then he resigned after only 9 games, despite being 7th on the table at the time. His name was cleared by the Portuguese FA, so he took over of Braga's B team for the 2017-18 season, who were in the Liga Pro, or the 2nd tier. In his 1 season in charge, he avoided relegation, finishing in 16th, albeit was only saved by goal difference, and he was therefore sacked. He took over at Salgueiros for the 2018-19 season. They were participating in the 4th tier of Portuguese football, where he failed to achieve promotion at his first attempt after they were relegated the season prior. He then had to wait until 2020-21 for him to be appointed as manager again. This time he was appointed manager of Estoril, a surprise appointment considering they were in Liga Portugal too, and most people thought it odd to appoint such a failure at promotion, in fact considered by some to be a bit of a relegation specialist. However, he finally gained success in his first season at Estoril. He won the league by 4 points. In 2021-22, Estoril were heavily tipped for the immediate relegation back to the Liga Portugal 2. However, his tactics seemed to fit right in at the top flight, and he led them to a 9th place finish. In 2022-23, Estoril did drop down to the 14th place after having a lot of star players stolen by other clubs. The season after, he dropped them into 16th place, therefore participating in a relegation playoff. But unfortunately, the club was relegated after losing that playoff. However, he managed to gain promotion again in 2023-24. Then in 24-25, with a brand new squad from the ones that had been relegated, he led them to 5th place and Conference League qualification. In the 25-26 Conference League, he led them to a group stage coming up against the likes of Legia Warsaw, Aston Villa and Zrinjski Mostar. Unfortunately, he could only manage 3rd place in the group. However, being able to turn attention to the league, he took them to 4th and therefore Europa League qualification. However, he left the club before the start of the 26-27 season, becoming the club director and leaving to take another to take on the European competition. He never became a manager again, insisting that he didn't want his reputation to become marred, and let it be a lesson to us all to retire just after we've achieved our best successes. Jurgen Klopp. He retired in 2001 and he took over manager of during the 2001-2 season. I haven't actually written down what club that is, so I can't remember who it is. I'm just going to quickly check who he took over as club. You guys may know, but this is foolish of me. He took over at FC Pavorzheim. Yeah, I can definitely pronounce that name. So he narrowly missed out of promotion from the 3rd tier with that team, which is no longer existing, finishing 2nd in the league by just 2 points. This gained the attention of Eintracht Frankfurt. However, unsure whether to give him a full-time gig, he took over their 2nd team. In 2002-03 season, he led them to promotion from the Oberliga Hessen, the 5th tier. Instead of sticking around to see if he could become Frankfurt's manager, he decided to take over Victoria Sindlingen for the 2003-04 season. He flew over under the radar a bit this season, but it was enough to gain the attention of Rot-Weiss Frankfurt for the 2004-05 season. They were in the Landesliga Hessen Süd, the 5th tier of German football, and in his first season he finished 2nd but failed in the playoffs. However, this was a very impressive performance, and Mainz 05 took him on as manager. He took over ahead of the 2005-06 season, and in his first season finished 11th in the Bundesliga. However, the season afterwards he was relegated to the 2nd Bundesliga in 16th. This was before the relegation playoff. And unfortunately for Klopp in 2007-08, he failed to get them promoted, finishing 4th, 2 points off promotion again. People by this point began to question whether Klopp was really the man to get them back to European football, especially with them stuck in the 2nd tier. However, the next season for 2008-09, he put all fears to bed by finishing 2nd and earning promotion back to the Bundesliga. He was given a task that he must finish above relegation zone or be sacked. However, the 2009-10 season was one of triumph as all fears of relegation were dashed out the window by a strong performance, and they finished a comfortable mid-table in 9th, the highest the club had ever been. This led to a new contract, and next season he raised levels of expectation even more by finishing 5th, thereby qualifying for the Europa League. However, the next season was relatively poor as they failed to even reach the qualification playoff for the group stage of the Europa League and dropped to 13th in the table. The season after of 2012-13 was no much better, equaling the 13th place finish, but did reach the quarterfinals of the DFB Pokal. The 2013-14 season was one of much more success for Mainz after some disgruntled fans at the start of the season thought they could be in a much better position without Klopp. However, in the 2013-14 season, he finished 7th, thereby qualifying for the Europa League again. However, in 2014-15, he was knocked out in the same round again and could only finish 11th in the league. He was therefore given 1 season to get back into Europe and hopefully progress to the group stage the season after. He did succeed in 2015-16 by finishing 6th and thereby qualifying automatically for the Europa League group stage. However, he resigned at the end of the season after 11 seasons and accepting he couldn't take the club any further. He then retired instead to become an author of football players' biographies, including Andre Moller and David Wagner. He also appeared as a pundit on German television for Mainz and DFB Pokal games. Towards the end of his career, he became a club sponsorship liaison for Mainz. Basically, went around assessing different sponsorships for the club. Rob Edwards. He retired in 2013, and in the 2013-14 season, he took over manager of Aston Villa, who were experiencing trouble finding someone to take on the management role, despite them being in the Premier League. He led them to 15th in the Premier League in his first season, and he therefore stuck around for the next season. But in 2014-15, he only just survived relegation 17th. But the saving grace was the FA Cup run. He had leading Villa to runners-up in the FA Cup. Therefore, the fans had more patience than usual from the manager. He led Villa into the 2015-16 season, but finished last place in the Premier League. He kept the faith, though, with him get given 1 more season to regain promotion or be sacked. It was a bold move, with many Villa fans wanting him sacked, and after he finished 13th in the Championship for the 2016-17 season, he was sacked with his team's 18 points of the playoffs and only 11 above relegation zone. Crystal Palace, however, decided to take the gamble on him and appointed him interim boss ahead of the 2017-18 season. By the end of September, they had just experienced 7 defeats and hadn't even scored a goal, so he was let go. He then took over as interim charge of Derby County in the second half of that season, and he steered them from mid-table into 6th position and the playoffs. However, he lost in the semi-final 2-1 on aggregate. At the end of the season, he turned down a contract with Derby to become manager of Wolverhampton Wanderers for the 2018-19 season. They had just been promoted from the Premier League, and the manager had fancied a larger job, so he had his work cut out to stave off relegation. But in dramatic fashion, he surprised the league by finishing 7th with Wolves. This qualified them for the Europa League, and in 2019-20 he replicated it again, finishing 7th and reaching the quarterfinals of the Europa League. Would his head be turned to bigger clubs? Unfortunately, 7th that season meant no European football, but he did manage to lead Wolves to the mid-table for the 2020-21 season, finishing 13th. He spent 1 more season at Wolves, finishing 10th in the Premier League. He then took a bold career move by dropping down to the Championship with the nailed-on relegation favourites of Blackpool. He may have worked miracles with Wolves, but this Orange Army he couldn't save, and was relegated in 23rd in his first season. The season after 2023-24, he missed out the playoffs in League One, finishing 8th. He was given 1 more season to get promoted with the Tangerines, which he did by winning the playoffs after finishing 4th in the season. He then took Blackpool for the first half of the 25-26 season. However, with them 17th in the table, he was sacked after a defeat left them 3 points above relegation zone. He was then appointed interim boss of Norwich City. With Norwich languishing on the bottom third of League One, it seemed a long time from the wonders of the Premier League. He guided them to 16th in the league, therefore safe, but not enough to earn him a contract. He then became a permanent manager of Barnsley, who won the Championship for the 27-28 season. He led them to a respectable 13th place finish. However, he left the club at the beginning of the season after a row with the owners over the summer spending, arguing it wasn't enough to stay in the league. He then took over interim charge of Fleetwood Town at the beginning of the 2028-29 season. With this point, Fleetwood had fallen into the National League and he had no wins in 4 games, and so he left the club. After a couple of months, he was appointed interim manager of Shrewsbury Town, a fellow side in the National League, but they were high-flying, and he ended his career on a high note, winning the National League, FA Trophy and Shropshire Senior Cup, therefore winning a treble. He then took over as a university lecturer in sports science at Loughborough University, where he spent his time until he fully retired. Pep Guardiola. He retired in 2016, in 2006. He then immediately took over as Barcelona's C team manager for the 2006-7 season, where he were then in the fourth tier, called the Tercera Division, and he led them to 13th in the mid-table, but had to face relegation to the 7th tier due to Barcelona B being relegated. With Barcelona C being folded instead of merging the two, and the Barcelona B manager being sacked, Guardiola took natural control of the B team. In his first season of 2007-8, he won the Tercera Division, gaining promotion to the third tier. The next season of 2008-9, he took them to 5th in the Segunda Division, B, or the third tier, and this led to him taking charge of Barcelona's first team. In his first season with Barcelona 2009-10, he took their golden generation to great success, winning La Liga, Supercopa de España, UEFA Super Cup, and FIFA Club World Cup, as well as reaching the semi-finals of the Champions League in his first season. In 2010-11, he again reaped success by again winning La Liga and the Supercopa de España, as well as winning the Champions League and finishing runners-up in the Copa del Rey. In 2011-12, he couldn't retain the La Liga title, instead finishing runners-up, but he did win the Copa del Rey and Supercopa de España, as well as the UEFA Super Cup and the FIFA Club World Cup, and he reached the semi-finals of the Champions League. The 2012-13 season was the worst to date for Pep, even though he still won the La Liga and was Supercopa de España runners-up, and reached the semi-finals of the Champions League. However, 2013-14 was worse, only finishing as runners-up in La Liga as well as Copa del Rey, and only managed to win the Supercopa de España, and couldn't get past the quarterfinals of the Champions League. With the manager being placed in threat, he came in clutch for the 2014-15 season by winning the continental treble of La Liga, Copa del Rey, and the Champions League. The 2015-16 season produced a domestic double of La Liga and Copa del Rey, as well as winning the UEFA Super Cup and the FIFA Club World Cup. The 2016-17 season was an exciting one, winning Copa del Rey and Supercopa de España, but they missed out on the treble by finishing 3 points off the La Liga title. Instead, they had to settle for second place. The 2017-18 season was a solid one, with Barcelona winning La Liga and Copa del Rey double, with only one loss in the league all season. Barcelona were on track to win the continental treble for the next season, having won La Liga and Supercopa de España. However, they lost out in the semi-finals of the Champions League. In the 2019-20 season, it was the worst season for years, not winning any silverware and only just missing out on the La Liga title. Coming off that disastrous campaign, the 2020-21 season was arguably worse still, and despite winning the Copa del Rey, he could only manage to get Barcelona to reach third place, in what for decades had been a two-horse race for the La Liga. He was therefore sacked at the end of the season for being out of the touch of the modern game. He ended his time as Barcelona's manager, having won 7 La Ligas, 6 Copa del Reys, 6 Supercopa de Españas, 2 Champions League, 3 UEFA Super Cups, and 3 FIFA Club World Cups. This led many to expect to take a high-flying job or retire ahead of the 2021-22 season. However, he took over as Brescia manager and won Serie B. He led them to the 5th place finish and playoffs, but he couldn't take them beyond the semi-finals of the playoffs. He then took over Roma ahead of the 2022-23 season. He could only lead them to 6th in Serie A, but he did reach the Coppa Italia semi-finals, but most impressively took them to the Europa League finals, where he lost to Europa League specialist Sevilla. He then returned to Brescia for the 2023-24 season for unknown reasons, but could only manage a mid-table 13th place finish in Serie B. He then decided to pursue money in the ever-greedy world of Arabia. He became manager of Al Ahly in the Qatar Stars League for the 2024-25 season. And in his first season, he won the Emir of Qatar Cup, and the season after of 2025-26 was incredibly mediocre, finishing 5th place in the league. He then left for Mexico for the 2026-27 season. He joined Doradas de Sinaloa, winning the Liga de Expansión MX, and therefore promotion. At the end of the season, he opted to retire instead of continue in the top flight. He then had a documentary made about him on Amazon Prime, which he starred himself as the main role, and then he goes into the world of politics, becoming a member of the Catalonia's Regional Assembly. Erik ten Hag. He became player manager of Twente for the 2001-2 season. He took them to 12th place, which was relatively decent considering the behind-the-scenes issue with Twente being made bankrupt the season after. In a cost-cutting move, he was resigned as a player manager, taking over as manager of De Graaf Sharp ahead of the 2002-3 season. In his first season, he ended bottom of the Eredivisie. However, he was given a second season in charge because he pleaded that he needed the squad to be built around him. The following season in the Eerste Division, he led them to 6th, but won the playoffs, thus gained promotion back to the Eredivisie. He then returned to Twente, who had new owners. In the 2004-5 season, he led Twente to 6th place, just missing out on the European qualification. The season after, he led them to 9th place and reached the finals of the UEFA Cup final playoff, like the playoff for UEFA Cup position. Having failed that, they still managed to reach European football by winning the playoffs for the Intertoto Cup. However, Ten Hag opted to leave Twente at the end of the season, and he joined IJC Waalwijk before the 2006-7 season. He had a woeful season, ending in the relegation playoffs, and lost them, therefore gaining relegation. This led to him being sacked. He then took over as manager of Utrecht for the 2007-8 season. In his first season, he led them to 10th in the Eredivisie and reached the third round of the Intertoto Cup. He also failed to progress beyond the semi-finals for the semi-final playoffs for UEFA Cup. At the end of the season, he returned to Twente for the third time, leading them into the 2008-9 season. In his first season back at the club, he finished in second place, as well as KNVB Cup runners-up, thereby qualifying for the Champions League. And in his first season, he also led them to knockout competition in Europe, having failed to... He also led them to knockout competition in Europe, having failed to qualify for the Champions League group stage as he lost against Arsenal. But he did lead them into second in the group stage of the Europa League, but failed to go beyond the round of 32. The 2009-10 season was a similar story in Europe, failing to qualify for the Champions League, but reaching the round of 32 in the UEFA Cup. However, at the domestic level, Ten Hag put himself in the history books, only losing 2 games in the Eredivisie, and he led Twente to their first ever league title. Despite having offers from other clubs, he stayed with Twente for the 2010-11 season and continued to have success, reaching the final of the KNVB Cup, winning that cup in the extra time for the third time the club had won that competition. However, a week later, they failed to reach the Eredivisie title by losing to Ajax, the title rivals, and ended up as runners-up come the end of the season. That season, they also qualified for the group stage of the Champions League for the first time in the club's history, and reached the quarter-finals for the Europa League after they dropped into that competition. At the start of the 2011-12 season, Ten Hag took Twente to winning the Johan Cruyff Shield for a second successive season. In Europe, he just managed to miss out on a second season of Champions League group stage football, but in the Europa League, he took them to the round of 16. However, the 2011-12 season was a flop in the league, finishing 6th and therefore ending up in the Europa League. For the 2012-13, things were no better in the league. They matched their 6th place finish, but failed to qualify for Europe as a result of not winning the playoffs. In Europe that season, they finished bottom of their group in the Europa League, and without the European football to distract them, they finished the 2013-14 season in 3rd place in the Eredivisie, therefore returning to Europa League as a guarantee the season after. However, over a row about how much money the owner was pumping into the club after Ten Hag left, after that argument, he decided to leave. The season after, Twente was deducted 3 points for financial mismanagement, and the chairman resigned in disgrace. And Ten Hag opted for a more family life, so refused to return to management, and was instead appointed as club ambassador for Twente. Eddie Howe. Having been a player at Bournemouth, he was offered a chance to manage them for the 2007-8 season. He took it, opting to play on as a player manager. In his first season, he couldn't prevent them from being relegated from League One. However, they kept the faith after seeing some bright work with the academy players and by reaching the quarterfinals of the EFL Trophy. In order to gain more success, Howe decided to retire from player at the end of the season. He finished 21st again, but this time in League Two, and again was only saved by a second consecutive quarter-final EFL Trophy trip. For the 2009-10 season, expectations were low, maybe even relegation to the conference, At the start of the season, Howe won 8 out of the 9 games, which was a club record, and was approached by Peterborough United for the Championship. However, he turned down the offer and secured promotion from League Two in second place, despite a transfer embargo in place for the whole season. For the 2010-11 season, more offers came in for Howe, including by Burnley. But this time, instead of reality, he stuck with the Cherries and led them to 6th in League One, therefore in the playoffs. However, he failed to go beyond the semi-finals against Huddersfield. 2011-12, therefore, was a mix of excitement and buzz around the place, and despite another quarter-finals appearance in the EFL Trophy, it was a boring season as a whole, finishing mid-table in 11th. The 2012-13 season was one of mixed expectations, some saying promotion, some saying mid-table, and some suggesting a relegation battle. What nobody expected was a guaranteed promotion, finishing second place in League One. Along with an FA Cup third round appearance, losing to eventual winners Wigan Athletic. For the 2013-14 season, everyone therefore expected Howe's Bournemouth to struggle with the intensity of a championship. After all, the last time we were at that level was in 1990. However, Howe did manage a mid-table 11th place finish and a fourth round appearance in the FA Cup. However, the penultimate match of the season, he said in the post-match conference he was leaving the club, stating someone else could take them further, and he had the utmost respect for the owners, players, and most of all the fans. He left to take over Portsmouth in League Two, outlining his idea for a 5-year project to get them back into at least the Championship like he did at Bournemouth. His first match was a draw against Plymouth, ending the season in 13th in League Two. It was hard work with Portsmouth, with club protests, and this wasn't helped by a 16th place finish in League Two and losing the FA Cup first round against non-league and local rivals Aldershot Town. He was therefore sacked at the end of the season, saying the club wanted instant results. Swindon Town had recently departed with their manager and won the hunt in the 2015-16 season for a new manager for an interim role. Howe was appointed until a successor could be found, and it was an abject leave of one season, with them ending in 15th, with Howe repeatedly coming out and saying the uncertainty of manager wasn't helping the team. He left at the end of the season, citing that he hadn't been offered a contract after the season and therefore refused to negotiate for one. Instead, for the 2016-17 season, he took over his former club, Bournemouth. With him in Premier League, a lot of Premier League watchers were querying the appointment, and even some Bournemouth fans. However, in the magic that Howe conjures up, he led them to 9th in the Premier League. The 2017-18 season wasn't equally as successful, finishing 12th in the Premier League, but reached the 5th round of the EFL Cup. For the 2018-19 season, it was an improvement in the EFL Cup with a quarter-finals appearance. However, slipping to 14th in the league was making Cherries fans a bit on edge. Therefore, when offered to take up an alternative role at the club, Howe opted to become a club ambassador and scout. He stuck in that role until his late 70s, never again to return to the dugout, repeatedly stating he enjoyed watching the games without the pressure of changing the results. Steve Cooper. Having retired in 2003, he decided for the 2003-04 season to become the assistant manager at Wrexham. Wrexham were in League One at the time, and at the halfway point of the season were in mid-table, but they were suddenly plunged into administration and therefore deducted 10 points and slammed into a relegation battle. And this was too far for Cooper and his team above him to be able to help out to avoid relegation. And so he decided, in order to keep the club afloat, that he would resign as the assistant manager so that they didn't have to pay his wages and he wouldn't have to be paid out of his contract. He then was given the job of the new Saints manager for the 2004-05 season and proved to be a successful man at the top, winning the double of the Welsh Cup and the Cymru Premier, helped by the influx of Oswestry Town players following the merger. At the end of the season, he took over Rhyl for the 2005-06 season, leading them to their first ever win in the European competition, reaching the second qualifying round of the UEFA Cup, but failed to qualify. However, with the Lily Whites, he claimed silverware, lifting the Welsh Cup for a second time as manager, and won the North Wales Challenge Club to claim a double. He also led them to third in the Cymru Premier League, meaning that Rhyl would play in Europe the season after. However, at the end of the season, he opted to take over as manager of Bangor City. For the 2006-07 season, however, it was a relatively unsuccessful season, finishing the league in 9th. He stuck with Bangor, promising silverware the season after this. He did so by winning the Welsh Cup. and finishing 5th in the league, thereby qualifying for Europe for the 2008-9 UEFA Cup. However, decided just before the 2008-9 season to take over at Portmadoc. An interesting choice considering the season before they had just evaded relegation. Maybe he wanted to prove that he could win the World Cup with any team in Wales, but it was a poor choice, only managing a 16th place finish. Although well clear of relegation zone, he couldn't get past the third round of the World Cup. He resigned with his head held low and being described by the media as being too cocky. He refused to become a manager again, citing undue media criticism for such an accoladed manager, having won 3 Welsh Cups, 1 Welsh Premier League and 1 North Wales Challenge Cup. Instead, he became a referee in the EFL for over 20 years. Paul Heckingbottom. He retired in 2012 and he then became assistant manager at Sunderland. In his first season of 2012-13, the Black Cats narrowly missed out on relegation by 3 points to the Championship, and the season after of 2013-14 was more successful, with him finishing with them in 14th in the table in the Premier League. He was then appointed Scarborough Athletics first team manager on an interim basis, and was described by the non-league paper as being the coup of the season. They were placed in the Northern Premier League Division 1 North for the 2014-15 season, and by the halfway stage, he had won 18 out of 22 games in the league, sitting just outside of the playoffs and reached the second qualifying round of the FA Cup. But in November, Heckingbottom had publicly claimed he wouldn't sign a contract and leave no matter what at the end of the season. He continued the good form in the second half of the season, but ended in 6th place, just 2 points shy of the playoffs. However, it was the highest finish the club had ever experienced, and they beat their record attendance as well. As promised at the end of the season, he left to become interim manager, with Paul stating the managers get sacked so quickly that he saw no need to sign a contract. He became the interim boss of Hartlepool United. For many fans, Hartlepool were nailed on for relegation in the 2015-16 season. However, Heckingbottom steered them clear into 16th and reached the third round of the FA Cup. However, at the end of the season, Heckingbottom yet again decided against signing a permanent contract and joined Darlington on an interim basis for 2016-17. He was going strong for the first 10 games, not losing once, therefore decided to sign a permanent contract for the first time. At the end of the season, he led Darlington to a playoff place in the National League North in 5th place, but they were banned from participating due to ground size regulations. Sure that Darlington would correct the issue the following season, he led them into the 2017-18 season. And sure enough, the club started constructing a new seated stand, but he couldn't repeat the standout season, instead finishing 12th. After the owners came out and publicly backed Heckingbottom and apologised that he didn't have the required funds due to them being allocated to construction, he therefore assembled a squad to be competitive in the league for 2018-19. Having only managed to reach 16th in the table come the end of the season, Heckingbottom was sacked. Weirdly enough, he took over as manager of Norwich City for the 2019-20 season, with many managers turning the job down because Norwich were bound to be relegated, having made mass cuts and low attendances. This proved a problem for Heckingbottom and couldn't prevent the inevitable and finished 20th in the Premier League. But despite assurances when he took the job, he wasn't given another season despite reaching quarter-finals of the FA Cup and requesting a chance to build a low-budget squad capable of promotion. He then took over Bradford City for 2020-21, saying that he wouldn't manage a club in the Premier League again due to them being too egotistic. However, with the Bantams, he could only lead them to 15th in League Two. He was sacked for underachieving, and he was given a lifeline through Sheffield Wednesday because they had been relegated to the Championship and were in a right state off the pitch, so needed a new manager. Maybe it's League One, relegated from the Championship. Heckingbottom came in for the 2021-22 season without fear of a sack and performed admirably, ending the season 4th, therefore competed in the playoffs, but failed to get past his former club of Sunderland in the semi-final. For the 2022-23 season, he performed slightly better, involved in a 3-horse title race in League One, but finished 3rd. However, cruised in the playoffs to gain promotion for the Championship. But with the owner refusing to give him a competitive budget, he left the club ahead of the 23-24 season, taking charge of local rivals Barnsley. In his first season, he led them to 3rd place in League One and won the playoffs for the 2nd consecutive season. This time, he stuck around in the Championship season for the 2024-25 season. He dropped into relegation zone of the Championship in 22nd and was therefore sacked. He was then appointed interim manager of Bradford City, who were struggling with relegation from League Two, but he steered them to safety in 16th. For this, he was given a permanent role ahead of the 2025-26 season, where he replicated a 16th place finish. This time, he left of his own volition to join Mansfield Town ahead of the 2026-27 season. But by this stage, with Clough having left, they tumbled 3 divisions from League One to the National League. In his first season, he led them to runners-up, but lost the playoff final. He then became interim manager of Gateshead ahead of the 2027-28 season, and having won 10 out of the 11 games in League Two, it looked like they were going to do well. But when he was given a permanent contract, they were catapulted into a dismal form, losing 21 of the remaining games of the season, ending up bottom of the league and relegated back to the National League. And Hickinbottom was sacked at the end of the season. For the 2028-29 season, he took over as permanent manager of Harrogate Town. By this time, he had been relegated to the National League North. However, in his first season, he won the West Riding Cup and finished 5th in the league and won the ensuing playoff to return to the National League. At the end of the 2028-29 season, he retired as manager at the age of 52. Ange Postecoglou. He retired in 1994. He then became manager of South Melbourne for the 1994-95 season, leading them to a 6th place finish. He failed to win the preliminary final. The next season was an even more disappointing result. In the 1995-96 season, he only managed to reach 8th, failing to even reach the playoffs. Having promised better performances to come, he was given another year by the new owners, who needed to deal with some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, such as changing the club's name. He led them to 3rd in the National Soccer League and the preliminary final. Having gained the fans on side, he led the club into the 1997-98 season and sparked an impressive end of the decade, winning both the 1997-98 and 1998-99 National Soccer League, finishing top of the league and winning the playoffs in 1997-98, and finishing runners-up in 1998-99 but winning the playoffs, and qualified for the inaugural Oceania Club Championship. This was the first time they'd won back-to-back championships since the 1960s. For the following 1999-2000 season, Postecoglou led them to winning the Oceania Club Championship, despite a very disappointing 10th place finish in the league. This qualified them for the FIFA Club World Cup. For the 2000-2001 season, he led them again to a 1st place finish, but failed to win the playoffs, despite being 8 points clear of 2nd, with a poor performance in the grand final. The 2001-2 season was already a concern, as lots of good players had left, and worries about poor performance in the grand final, but previous seasons still hung over the club. They therefore struggled, with Postecoglou only managing to reach 5th place with them and failed to progress beyond the semi-finals of the title. Things went from bad to worse as the 2002-3 season, he failed to reach the playoffs by a singular point, finishing 7th, leaving the club by mutual consent at the end of the season. For 2004, he took over Western Suburbs in New Zealand, where he performed well, only losing 2 games that season, but finished 3rd in the Wellington Capital Premier League Federation 5. Don't ask. However, with the restructuring of New Zealand's football structure, Postecoglou quit as he felt unable to commit to the new geographical journeying involved in the new structure. He then became a general in the Greek army at the age of 39 after returning home from the 2004 Olympics in Athens and felt a pull to join in with his national team. David Moyes. He retired in 1998 and became manager of Celtic for the 1998-99 season. In his first season, he finished as runners-up in the Scottish Premiership and Scottish Cup. His one saving grace was reaching the 2nd round of the UEFA Cup. However, many wanted him to be sacked. However, he was allowed to stay for the 1999-2000 season, again finishing runners-up in the Scottish Premiership. It was slightly improved as he won the Scottish League Cup and yet again reached the 2nd round of the UEFA Cup. Lots of fans began to question whether appointing a newbie for such a big job was a good idea. However, the 2000-2001 season proved to be one of the best seasons for Celtic, as he won the domestic treble of the league title, League Cup and Scottish Cup, having lost in the league only 3 times that season and was 3 points off the 100 mark, which had yet to be reached by that point. Moyes then opted to make a name for himself in England. But unlike Gerrard in real life of relative recent times, Moyes took over a much more realistic task, taking over the reins of Cambridge United. The 2001-2 season, though, was a disastrous campaign for Cambridge, being relegated from Division 2 at the bottom of the league, 15 points from safety. However, a run to the final of the EFL Trophy kept Moyes in a job. Determined to prove his worth in 2002-3, he overfought way too many games in Division 3, finishing the campaign in 12th, and got sacked at the end of the season for 2 poor seasons in a row. However, remembering his treble in Scotland, Bristol City appointed him as manager in 2003-4, without apparently seeing his dismal performances at Cambridge. However, this time, when in Division 2, he did relatively well, reaching third in the league, clearly learning the lesson to go back to basics, although he did fail to win the playoff finals by 1-0. The season after was again another disappointing one, where promotion was expected. He ended in League One in 7th, a point off the playoffs, which resulted in his sacking. Some called it unfair, as others stated that he had one job at the start of the season. For the 2005-6 season, he took over as manager of Shrewsbury Town, who had very low expectations, with many believing they would be relegated. And so he just managed survival in his first season, but he led the Shrews to 10th, only 5 points off League 2 playoffs, actually, in reality. For the 2006-7 season, Shrewsbury Town had their last season of their old stadium, and this led more fans into the club, wanting many to say goodbye, or were general groundhoppers hoping to tick it off before it was demolished. This increased crowds meant that Moyes overperformed by achieving 14 games unbeaten with them. They finished the season in 7th, thus qualified for the playoffs and reached the playoff finals, the first at the new Wembley Stadium, and in front of a record attendance for a 4th-tier tie. Moyes, therefore, had the privilege of opening the new stadium at Shrewsbury, but it was a dismal season, with Shrewsbury finished 18th, and people bemoaning the new stadium, and Moyes was sacked at the end of the season. He then returned north of the border to Dunfermline Athletic for the 2008-9 season. In his first season, he led Dunfermline to third in the First Division, and also reached the semi-finals of the Scottish Challenge Cup and the 4th round of the Scottish League Cup. The 2009-10 season was full of expectation of a final return to Premiership football, especially with Moyes' pedigree in Scotland, but he could only replicate a third-place finish in the league and reach the 5th round of the Scottish League Cup, losing against Moyes' former club Celtic. Ahead of the 2010-11 season, he moved to Hamilton Academical in the Scottish Premier League. However, it was a very poor season for the Accies, with them finishing 12th and getting relegated, ironically switching places with Dunfermline. The only saving grace was a 5th round appearance in the Scottish Cup, but this wasn't enough and he got sacked at the end of the season. He then returns to South to become manager of Preston North End. In his first season, he led Preston to a mid-table finish in the 2011-12 League One, finishing 15th. He did, however, reach the area final of the EFL Trophy. This prevented him from being sacked, and he got another crack of a whip. 2012-13 was not much better, with a 14th place finish, and only reaching the area semi-final of the EFL Trophy. It seemed like a million years since Moyes had won that treble, or even a playoff place. Nobody is quite sure why Moyes wasn't sacked, but he wasn't, and it may have proven the best move an owner had ever made, as he led Preston to 5th place in the 2013-14 season, as well as reaching the 4th round of the FA Cup. To the fans, it didn't matter. They didn't get past the semi-finals of the playoffs. It represented a positive move. 2014-15 was a season that was highly anticipated, and it didn't disappoint. He led the Lily-Whites to a 3rd place finish and won promotion via the playoffs, as well as reaching the 5th round of the FA Cup. In 2015-16, he overperformed the odds and led Preston to 11th place. Knowing that this good vein of form wouldn't ever last, he retired at the end of the season, and he returned to Glasgow to become a manager of the sportswear chain and worked as a lecturer on sports science in his spare time. He then became secretary of Coleraine Football Club in Northern Ireland. After giving up lecturing, he became a pundit on Radio 5 live on SPFL evening games. I think this is the final one. We've got Gary O'Neill. He retired in 2019. He then became manager at Portsmouth for the 2019-20 season. He had a relatively successful first season of management, finishing 5th in League One, losing the playoff semi-finals and reaching the FA Cup 5th round and runners-up in the EFL Trophy. For the 2020-21 season, it was more difficult, especially due to the lack of fans having a profound effect. He could only get Pompey to finish in 8th place in the league. He stuck with Portsmouth for the 2021-22 season, but it continued to unravel and he could only manage a 10th place finish in League One, and was therefore sacked at the end of the season. He then became interim manager of Walsall at the beginning of the 2022-23 season. He started well, winning the opening 2 games of the season, but 3 losses in 5 meant he was relieved from his duties, with Walsall sitting in 13th. He would have to wait for the start of the 2023-24 season to be given a job again, this time as interim manager of Cardiff City. However, with only 1 win in his first 5 games and 3 losses, he was relieved of his duties, with Cardiff in 19th in the table. In the championship, that is. At Christmas time, he was reinstated as Portsmouth manager, and he had the miraculous turnaround with Pompey, winning the league and the EFL Trophy double, and returning to the championship after many years' absence. For 2024-25, Portsmouth were expected to be poor value for money, but he steered them to 4th in the table and thus reached the playoffs. However, they lost in the playoff finals to the newly relegated Wolverhampton Wanderers. The season after, he couldn't replicate the playoff finish, but he finished a respectable 11th place. But over the 2026-27 season, he opted to join Middlesbrough as manager. He led them to the championship title by an 8-point margin. However, the 2027-28 season was a woeful one in the Premier League, with them finishing bottom of the league with 37 points, admittedly only 2 points from safety. Hence, he was not fired ahead of the 2028-29 season, and that faith paid off, with him securing an immediate return, yet again winning the championship title, although only by 2 points this time. He had one job ahead of the 2029-30 season, and was to make sure that Middlesbrough didn't become a yo-yo team. This time he did manage it on a dramatic final day. The end ranking was Everton bottom of the league with 35 points, 19th was Burnley with 36 points, then Sheffield United also relegated with 36 points. Manchester United had fallen off by this point and finished 17th with 37 points, and Middlesbrough had finished 16th with 38 points. However, he opted to leave the club come the end of the season instead of taking over as manager of West Ham United for the 2030-31 season. In his first season, it was a disaster, with the Hammers getting relegated in 18th with 36 points, getting relegated on goal difference. However, due to his record of promotions from the Championship, he wasn't sacked for the 2020-31-32 season. This paid off as he secured promotion via second-place promotion back to the Premier League, but decided not to stick around for the 2032-33 season, taking over fellow London club Queen's Park Rangers. By this stage, QPR were in League One and were in a bad shape, predicted to be relegated with 6 points deducted and a transfer embargo. It seemed a stupid job to take. However, he guided them to 16th, well clear of relegation zone at the end of the season. He then became manager of Norwich City for the 2033-34 season. They had dramatically fallen into League Two for 2031-32, finishing 10th that season. But in 2032-33, he regained League One status by coming third in League Two. However, the previous manager had left to take on a bigger job, so Gary O'Neill was appointed. Hold up. So yeah, he was then won League One title. And surprisingly, the first time I'm asking, yes, no, there's another club in here which I've not included, written down. This is so poor for my notes taking. Sorry and apologies again. Thank you very much for watching. If you are still at this point, then you are doing incredibly well. Is this Bristol City at this point? No, so he was still manager at Norwich. Sorry, I'm just getting really confused. So yeah, he then was won League One by quite surprising at the first time of asking, yet again proving how great a manager he is at gaining promotion, this being his 5th promotion. And the 2034-35 season proved to be one of consolidation, and he finished a solid mid-table in 14th. He then opted to become manager of Bristol City for the 2035-36 season. In his first season, he led them to 13th in League One. They were poor value for money at this stage, and he was given another season in desperate hope for promotion. The 2036-37 proved to be worse, finishing 16th in League One. He was sacked at the end of the season with many questioning was it an impossible job, or had O'Neill effect been lost. Bolton Wanderers didn't think so and appointed him manager for the 2037-38 season. They by this point had miraculously climbed up the leagues to return to the Premier League, and he led them to 7th in Conference League football after winning the League Cup. He opted to retire at the end of the season instead of proving his worth on the international stage. He retired at age 55, and he then starred in a documentary illustrating his 5 promotion seasons and the EFL Cup win, in each episode focusing on a different event. He then became the director of the academy at AFC Wimbledon. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you're new around here. HX, probably Herbs or something like that. Thank you very much for the football. Thank you for supporting. And I will catch you later. I don't know what the next video is going to be on, but it'll be something interesting regardless. But if you've got anything you want to recommend, then please leave so in the comments below.